Hi everyone, thank you for joining me here today on our channel. My name is Mike Bacreslis and I'm one of the advisors with Green Private Wealth. If you haven't subscribed to our channel already, please hit the subscribe button below and don't forget to like the video as well as turn notifications on for more high quality personal finance tips. Today, I'm going to spend some time going over the top 5 common mistakes that we see people make when investing in their tax-free savings accounts. Before we dive into that though, I just wanted to take a second and go over the basics of a TFSA and how it works. TFSAs were introduced back in 2009 by the federal government as a way to help Canadians essentially save money for retirement and to save for things like big purchases. The way the account works is that any money that you put into it and all the growth that happens in the account, when you make the withdrawal eventually down the road when you need the funds, you don't pay any tax on it. So big difference there between an RRSP and a TFSA. You don't get the tax deduction like you would with an RRSP, but you also don't pay any tax the way you would with an RRSP when you do eventually take the money out as needed. So in order to open up a tax-free savings account, you just need to be 18 years of age, you need to be a resident of Canada, and you need to have a valid social insurance number. Each year, CRA releases the annual contribution limit. So essentially, they'll tell you how much you can put into the account each year. For this year, 2024, the contribution limit is $7,000, which is up from $6,500 in 2023. And back to what I mentioned about the accounts being introduced in 2009, if you were 18 in 2009 and you've never contributed to a TFSA, you've actually got up to $95,000 a room that you could put in a TFSA right now. Okay, so without further ado though, let's get into what I mentioned before, the top 5 common mistakes that we see people making with their tax-free savings account. The first one is over-contributing, putting too much money into the account. This is why we always recommend people go to their MyCRA account, because when you log in there, you'll actually be able to see how much contribution room that you have available for the account so that you can make sure you stay on side and don't go over that limit. A lot of people ask, well, can I have a TFSA open at multiple institutions? The answer is absolutely yes, you can. But it's important that you don't go over that total contribution limit that you have. Because when you do go over that total contribution limit I mentioned, what CRA does is they'll actually charge you a 1% penalty per month on the amount that you've gone over your contribution limit. So this can actually add up to be quite a big penalty depending on how much excess you put into the account. And that's why we definitely recommend, going back to what I said, you check your MyCRA account. It'll tell you for sure how much room you've got in there, and then that way you can make sure you never go over it. And while we're still talking about over-contributing to your TFSA, another thing to be aware of is when you make a withdrawal from the tax-free savings account, let's say you're taking out $1,000, nice round number for the sake of the conversation, you actually can't put that $1,000 back in until the following year unless you have additional contribution room. Because if you fully maxed it out and you take out $1,000 or whatever the amount may be, you don't get that contribution room back until the following year. So basically, you want to make sure you pay attention to this, because if you put it in before then, you are going to get charged that 1% penalty that I mentioned per month on that excess that you put back into the account. So that's something we always remind our clients of. Be aware of that when you're making a withdrawal of the account. Make sure that you have the available contribution room to put it back in. Otherwise, you're going to need to wait until the following year. Now, the next thing that we come across is people using a TFSA as a savings account instead of an investment account. I know the name, it is very misleading. A lot of people see the word savings in there and they think that it's similar to an everyday savings account or a high interest savings account, but that is actually far from the case. So a lot of people don't know, but in your TFSA, you can actually put things in there like publicly traded stocks, bonds, even certain companies' bonds you can put in there too, certain corporate bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, GICs. These are all available options to you to put into your tax-free savings account so that you can get some real growth happening in there, which will help you down the road in retirement and also too for big purchases if ever needed. This is a great way to build up your savings and then you can take them out tax-free as needed. So definitely don't use this as just an everyday savings account. You want to get the most of it by putting investments in there that are going to give you the best best value for your money over the long term. Okay, so the next one we're going to talk about is naming a successor holder or a beneficiary. So what we see people here, the mistake that we see is sometimes they'll name their spouse as a beneficiary instead of a successor holder. If you have a spouse or a common law partner, it's very important that you name them a successor holder. What that means is that if you pass away, they effectively inherit the account and all the rights that come with it. It is essentially you're picking up your TFSA and it is now their TFSA. With a beneficiary designation, it's much more complicated and something you'd only want to do without the availability of naming a spouse or a common law partner, because with a beneficiary, what happens is they get the money, it is paid out to them tax-free, but if they don't have any available contribution limit beyond what has been given to them for the future, any of that growth that happens from the time they receive the money, it's actually going to be fully taxable to them. So quite an important distinction there between the difference of a successor holder and a beneficiary, right? So definitely something to be aware of. Always make sure that your spouse is a successor holder on the account. Okay? So next is not knowing how market gains or losses impact your contribution room. Not many people really take time to think about how the performance of their investments inside the tax-free savings account can have an impact on your contribution room. But actually, it is a very important thing to consider. And I'll give you an example. Let's say you've put $10,000 into your tax-free savings account. That $10,000, let's say the investments have performed very well and things are going great, and it's now $11,000. Let's say that you want to take out that $11,000 this year for whatever you may need it for. You actually can't put that $11,000 back in until the following year, unless you have additional contribution room. But the big thing here to focus on is that you can actually put $11,000 into the account next year, as opposed to just the 10 that you had in there. Because the value has gone up by $1,000 to $11,000, you've essentially gained an extra $1,000 of contribution room through the performance of the investments in the account. But on the flip side of that, let's say the investments haven't performed as planned and it's actually gone the other way, and that $10,000 is now $9,000. If you take out that $9,000, you can't actually go ahead and put $10,000 back in unless you have additional room to put it in. That $9,000, that loss of $1,000 has actually impacted your contribution room, and you've lost $1,000 of room as a result of the performance of the investments in your account. This is why it's very important to really plan this out and consider what investments you're going to have in your TFSA, and also to consider the timing of the withdrawal itself too. These are things we go over with our clients in detail, just to make sure that the TFSA, the investments are set up properly, and the timing of the withdrawal. We also just like to remind people of this, whether it's a gain or a loss in the account. We just want them to be reminded that it does impact future contribution room. Okay, and lastly, the mistake that we see people doing is day trading in their TFSAs. This is something you want to avoid at all costs, because if CRA essentially flags your account because of too much frequent trading in there, they can actually consider this a business, right? So essentially, if you're carrying on an active trading business in your TFSA, like CRA would view it if there's too many transactions in there, the dividends, the interest, the capital gains, everything you're making from your investments in that account loses its tax-free status, and you're actually taxed on that as business income. So definitely something, as I mentioned, to avoid at all costs, because it completely defeats the purpose of having a tax-free savings account and having all the growth in the account occur tax-free. So definitely something that we also caution people about, because nobody wants to be taxed in their tax-free savings account. So, overall, a tax-free savings account, it's an invaluable resource to help you save for retirement or big purchases, because all of that growth happens tax-free. And, as I mentioned, it doesn't get any better than that, right? Nobody wants to pay tax on their investments, and this is one of the only accounts that allows you to do that. So as always, if you have any questions about how TFSA works or you're looking for any guidance, please don't hesitate to reach out to us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, or greenprivatewealth.com. We'd love to really connect and answer any questions that you have and go over everything in more detail. Thanks again, and see you next time.